The Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Sean.
Well, hello, everybody. We are back. Welcome to another episode of the fabulous, the wonderful, the amazing. I feel like I'm Ric Flair right now, the old wrestler. What was he? I think he was Mr. Wonderful or something.
The Nature Boy.
There
Ric
you go.
Flair.
Yeah.
Woo!
There you go. Welcome back to the Evergreen Show. I'm your host, Noah Fleming, with my co-host, Dr. PhD, astro something scientist, astronaut scientist, Mr. Sean Veltman. Sean, how are you today? Give me the weather.
I'm doing great. Now, every time you give me a new accolade, I feel like I got to go back to school for a few years.
Well, you know, sometimes our readers might think you need to go back to school, or our listeners. But anyways, here we are back for another fine episode of the Evergreen Show. And today we are talking about something extremely valuable, something extremely important, something all the salespeople we talk to say they do regularly with a lot of rigor and a lot of excitement. And when we actually get down to the brass tacks and look at what they're doing, we find not much of this is being done at all. And it's the simple act of referrals and referral generation. Now, Sean, I know you know that we hear this all the time. Referrals are, you know, a common part of the salesperson's toolbox. And of course I ask for referrals. And how dare you suggest that I don't know how to get referrals? But when we dig down and we look at it a little bit closer, we find that companies are still very reactive when it comes to generating referrals and to getting referrals. And so the old mantra of word of mouth and things like that, that if we provide great service, then obviously our customers will give them. The reality is no, right? Nobody wakes up every day saying, gee, I can't wait to give Fleming Consulting & Co. some more money today and a couple new referrals. You should think that, but they don't always think that. And so it's our job as sales professionals, as organizations, as companies, to make sure we have a clearly defined, well thought out referral process. Actually, you don't even have to be really thought out. Just have one, have something. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Sean, how's my lead in there?
Your lead-in was great. You know, when we talk about so many of the things we talk about, including referral generation, I'm reminded so much of that old saying that the man who can't read is no better off than the man who doesn't read. And, everybody that we talk to knows referrals are important, but so few of them are asking for them on a consistent basis. And we hear things like, well, I'm busy, or it was jammed in there today. And that's fine for a day. But we see this over the course of months and quarters and years, that it's always better at another time to do it. It's never the right time now to do it. And so you get companies where you find a full sales team that's asked for a grand total of 4 referrals over the course of the last year, even though every one of them knows how important they are and will tell you when you sit down with them how important they are. They're just not actually doing it when the rubber meets the road.
You know, that's exactly true. And so today we want to talk about the ins and outs of a simple referral generation process, the steps that we believe you need to be taking on a regular basis to make sure these do become part of your marketing, revenue, sales increasing toolkit, and that they're actually being implemented and followed through on regularly. So, Sean, do you want me to get into some of the necessities here, or do you want to kick that off? Where do you want to take this?
You kick it off, I'll jump in afterwards, and then we can swap places.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure, Sean. I was hoping you were going to take that over. So, as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is that you are asking for referrals regularly. One of the things that we see happen again, time and time again, is that it's just a reactive process. And so we need to build it in, just like our sales process, to make sure that we're asking for referrals. So one of the first things that comes to mind for me is obviously knowing when is the right time to ask for a referral, who is the right person to ask, what are you asking them for, and then how do you follow through on that? And I think that's, to me, as simple as it can get. understanding that there is a right time and a right place. So just because, a client has done business with you for the first time, it might not be the right time to ask for a referral. But we'll talk about ideas in there, how you can plant the seed for referrals in those cases. But again, it's about understanding the right place and the right time. So if you have clients that have been with you for a long time, the question that you need to be asking your salespeople is, when was the last time we asked them for a referral? Who else do they know that's like them that could refer us to somebody else? So obviously the identification of right place, right time. The next component for me is the identification of who is the type of person we want to get referred to. So typically with salespeople, if you're a sales guy and your key contact is the purchasing manager across a dozen companies, you can be relatively certain that purchasing managers in other organizations would be good, valuable buyers for you. So that's important to know who your buyers are. And then, of course, there's things like internal requests, internal referrals. And then the final part of the process to me, which is so important, is making sure that all of the activity is recorded into your CRM or whatever toolkit you're using to identify when was the ask, to identify how you asked, to identify how you identified who to ask for, or, if it was more general, like who can you introduce me to? And then again, recording that information into the CRM, making sure you set up your next contact date and making sure you follow through. So Sean, that to me is as simple as this can get, but it's important to identify the process. What do you think?
I think that's a really great overview of it. I want to really quickly just kind of sum up the steps, put some numbers in front of them. And there's a couple things you said there that I want to dive into. So to start with, what I heard you say there, Noah, is the first step is identifying who you want to be referred to, right? And this is so important because we've all heard the horror stories of, the old insurance sales guys who wouldn't leave your kitchen until you gave them 5 names. And so they got a lot of John Smiths and Joe Fakingtons. And we don't want to be that. We don't want to be saying, look, just give me names, right? What we really want here are the, what's that? The Glengarry leads. We want the Glengarry leads.
Well, we want the right leads. We want the right
That's
introductions.
Right. And the way that we get the Glengarry leads is we do a little bit of work beforehand. So, it's irresponsible to go in and say to any of your clients, hey, just give me some names, give me some referrals. Because what you're really saying there is you put in a lot of thought and you put in some work and effort and figure out how to make me more money. And that's just rude, right? What we should be doing beforehand is the work. We should be thinking, who do we want? Do we want people like you? Then ask, hey, who do you know like yourself in other organizations? Who else is in your position in the city that you know that you could refer me to? If you want something else, ask for that, right? You should know, and we've talked about the Walter White exercise before. We've talked about so many different exercises you can do to identify who is your buyer, who is your best client. You should be able to then give a picture of that client or that prospect to the person you're asking for a referral and say, do you know somebody who fits this profile? Do you know anybody who fits this profile? If yes, then please make an introduction.
I love it. And I think that's, again, is we can make this relatively simple. The biggest problem we're going to find in most companies is your salespeople are going to say, well, we do this already. I do this as part of my normal work. Again, put the process around it because that's the key. When we start looking at this with most of our clients, what we find is they're not really doing it. And so we start to get them to track these little components of that. Who did you ask for? Why did you ask for that person? Put some thought around it, right? And then if you got the introduction, did they actually deliver on the introduction? Whether it was an email, a phone call, did you follow up? And so Sean also mentioned some things there which I think come up. First of all, Sean, you should be thrown in the insane asylum for mentioning the Glengarry leads. I'm not sure if that's been mentioned on the Evergreen show yet, but we're going to let it slide. One of the things that does come up, though, is there is a feeling of the ickiness around referrals. And so one of the things that, we've told others is don't use the word referrals. And I've heard others say this. A friend of mine, Alex Goldfein, who wrote a book called The Revenue I forget what it's called. He talks about this too. Don't use the word referrals, right? If it makes you feel silly, if it makes you feel icky, use the word introduction or somebody like you in a similar position. Who could you introduce us to that would benefit from us? And those are the types of things that you need to help your team work on. You need to find out, first of all, what is the process they use, and then how could you actually improve it, get it a little bit better, tighten it up, and make it something that they're doing regularly and consistently. Consistently. Thank you very much.
And, I think you said a few times the importance of tracking it, the importance of putting it in your CRM or whatever tool you're using that allows you to see later that you've asked for this, but also that allows sales management to look at it. Because if the sales management team isn't looking at referral generation, if you're not looking at that activity on a regular basis, if you don't have an easy way to determine when your salespeople have asked for a referral, when they've got the referral, when they've followed up on it, then you're being negligent here, right? You can't blame your salespeople for not doing it if you don't have a way to monitor, to check that they're doing it, and to give them a pat on the head when they've done it right, or a bonus.
Exactly. So let's talk about a challenge this week of how we can build a better referral generation process. In additional podcasts, in upcoming future podcasts, we'll dig a lot deeper on this. We'll talk about things like, I mentioned briefly planting the seed. So once we start to build the process, you can start to help them identify, again, when is the right time, how to do that. So you might say something like, your first order is going to be arriving next week. Just so you know, most of our clients end up giving us referrals because they're so pleased with our results. They're so pleased with what we deliver. I want you to realize that I'm going to be asking you for these things. And so again, these are all types of things we're going to discuss in future episodes of the wonderful Evergreen Show. But Sean, let's talk here about a challenge. How can we actually start to build the process here for better referral generation?
Okay, so I'll give a challenge and then you can add on to it or give a second one if you like. But here's the Sean challenge for this week. First, set a rule with your team. When you ask for a referral, you need to make a note in the CRM that says, ask John for referral. Then, as soon as you follow up on that referral, you need to create a new prospect in your CRM and say, this prospect was referred from John. And then you need to have the follow-up to John about how you let him know about the referral. So if it went great, say that, make a note about the entirety of the process. So you open the loop by asking for a referral, you reach out to the referral, then you close the loop by thanking the original person for the referral they gave you. If all of this is tracked in your CRM and you can search it easily as management, then you are in a great position, because then all that you have to do is say to your salespeople, you need to generate 3 referrals a week or a month or a quarter or whatever makes sense given the number of clients you deal with, the size of your company, all of that stuff. You figure out what the numbers are, but once you have a way to track it, then you can very easily give that goal to your salesperson and make sure that they're hitting it. And that's what I recommend that you do. So that's our challenge for this week. Set up the rules, set up how the salespeople have to act so that you can track it easily and then make them do it.
So let me add one more thing here, which I think is extremely important. Part of Sean's challenge there and part of what we talked about in this very short podcast, because we like to keep these tight and concise, is that you need to be tracking this. It needs to be entered in the CRM. So if you're still one of the presidents, owners, CEOs, company, whoever you are, and you're not using a CRM or you're not using a tool to track activity and the things that we talk about very often, to track customer buying habits, to track everything that's going on, to understand when quotes are being followed up on, when they're not being followed up on, to understand if your people are asking for referrals, to build exception reports. Sean, am I missing anything here?
There's a lot that you could do, right? If you can't track anything, you can't do anything. So,
but in that rant, am I missing anything that I'm trying to say there? If you're not doing this, you need, look,
you need to have a CRM in place. You need to have some tracking mechanism, because you're right. Otherwise you can't do any of the monitoring, any of the follow-up, any of the exception reporting, any of the things that are going to help you and your sales team actually drive more revenue.
Right. So let me be shameless here. If after 31 episodes you're still missing out on these areas, don't just go out and jump and get Salesforce or the latest thing you find. Reach out and let's talk about what are the types of things that you need to be tracking in your company that would make a dramatic impact. So again, in some companies we find they need to be solely tracking things like activity. In some companies we need to be doing far more. We need to be looking at a much deeper level, like quote follow-up. In some cases, you might need to just really understand, again, how to build your sales process into your tools or how to implement your referral generation process into your tools. Even testimonials, the gathering of testimonials. Ask some companies how often their salespeople are asking for testimonials. The answer is almost never. Again, these are the types of things we can build and we can help you do, and you can do them with some consistent intent behind them. So, Sean, I love your challenge. I don't think I got anything else to add today. We're at about the 15-minute mark. I'm going to give you one last word, and then I'm going to cut you off.
I say go forth and generate some referrals.
All right, folks, so we will revisit this topic later. If you enjoyed the podcast today, again, as always, you can reach out to us off my website, noahfleming.com. Always wonderful to hear from you. I love hearing from you, especially when you have questions or topics you would like us to cover in the future. Continue to spread the word. We're only 30 episodes in, so we're trying to grow this thing. We're working hard at it. We see no signs of stopping in the near future. And again, send your feedback, comments, criticism, complaints. Well, forward all the complaints to Sean. Otherwise, folks, we will see you next Monday on The Evergreen Show. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Sean Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.